Okay. So yeah, guys, again, just as a recap, my name is Pat Jamison. I am a senior sales director with the team here at Control Case. And really, what is it that I do here? I'm looking at it as we are all about connecting dots between our channel partners and their clients around a very complicated and sometimes hard to navigate subject of compliance. I really love working with MSPs that build that culture of cybersecurity and compliance and do it at scale. I'm really all about that those net new logos, expansion, retention, really getting that sweet spot of your MRR. And what we do and what I've approached our channel partners with is really living with them with a selling mindset, where we really believe that stronger together in the channel is really the theme. And whether you're a vendor, an MSP, or anywhere in between, my goal is to really work and collaborate and not compete with my people from a channel perspective. So we're a proud partner of the IT Nation community. We're also, as a side note, I had 4 wonderful years working directly with ConnectWise. So I really was able to have kind of the opportunity to join the Control Case team because I'm strongly a believer in that compliance will be the center of the MSP channel here relatively soon, if not already. So when the opportunity to continue into the next chapter that still allowed me to keep collaborating with really such a great partner as ConnectWise is, I really couldn't be happier. And so, we'll go ahead and get started. So when we're talking about Control Case, think about us really as your compliance wingman. Okay, well, let's face it, compliance, it can be a beast. But with partner relationships like Control Case, you don't have to essentially tame that beast alone. So we are a global sidekick in that sense to your compliance as a service, where we're going to help you, your clients, really crush those really complex regulatory and cybersecurity requirements without trying to break a huge sweat over it. We are headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia. We do have a global squad. We're across North America, Europe, Asia, Pacific, Middle East, Latin America. Really anywhere you're going to need from a global perspective, we have the team to handle it. I'll also note that we are not just a partner with ConnectWise from a relationship perspective. We are, in fact, a ConnectWise Invent certified partner as well. So when we look at our tool sets that engage our MSPs and their customers for compliance readiness and other certifications, we have tool sets that actually seamlessly integrate to the ConnectWise PSA. So what that means, we built it hand in hand with the ConnectWise API team. We passed a serious security check because we know they don't mess around, and it's fully certified, ready to roll, and it's backed by Tier 1 integration support. So we're not just another vendor. We really look at it as a compliance co-pilot to your ConnectWise ecosystem. So ultimately what we're doing, we help you, the MSP, check all those boxes about those core competencies around compliance and certification. So whether that's PCI, DSS, HIPAA, ISO 27001, SOC 2, GDPR, CMMC, the list goes on. We actually have a authority and accreditation to basically work against about 65 to 67 different certification types. So the laundry list is there. And so we definitely have a team that can tackle almost anything when it comes to things of compliance nature. We also do some things from a security testing and risk management perspective, third-party pen testing, app testing, code reviews, firewall checks, things of that nature. We look at those services as a way to complement our MSP relationships, where we're looking at being a partner to the teams that we work with is really looking at being an add to their bottom line when they cannot. So as they work with us, if they're in a situation where they're needing a little support in one area or another that they can't tackle, our team is happy to step in and collaborate with them to make sure that they can do that. So Bottom line, control case makes compliance less of a headache and a lot more of those high fives. We want to see that we're doing some things. So we really want to help MSPs scale, simplify, and really succeed with this process without drowning through a process of long documentation and other stuff. So what we're going to do is basically make sure that all those different organization types, and I throw not just MSPs into that camp team, we're also talking about the MSPs and their end customers they work with. So we deal with all organizational shapes, sizes, and we really help breeze through that certification and continuous compliance process as much as humanly possible. We really like to cut down on the time, cost, and stress that usually comes with these things. And so we're not your typical stiff suit consultant types when it comes to compliance. We really do like to be thought of as a compliance auditor that is really your co-pilot. So instead of just checking boxes, we really do like to roll up our sleeves and work alongside you. So we bring, smart automation, expert guidance through this process that really can help you as an MSP and your end customers have some real peace of mind of that you're dealing with an organization that lives, breathes, and handles IT compliance on a day-to-day basis. This isn't something where we just visit. We live here every day. So whether you're trying to meet regulatory requirements yourself, whether you're going to need to win over some customers that are in this field, or you just frankly want to get a little more sleep at night knowing that compliance is covered, that's where we say Control Case can have your back. So with us in your corner, what we like to do is really help educate and build up that feeling that you can be a trusted advisor around this subject of compliance. Okay. So the other thing that we say is, like, when we look at the MSPs are really, from the value proposition from a compliance perspective, you ultimately are the ones holding the map, the compass, and maybe if you haven't even have had some snacks when you're driving this bus, but you are going to be a part of that process. And with somebody like Control Case and a partner that can work with you, you're not being, by yourself. You know what's being used, how, and why. So you have that full picture. You have tools, you have systems, you have workflows, you see it all. You know what happens next or what needs to happen next. So what we can do is collaborate with you with that inheritance and understanding, where we can work together, where you can be the star and be that trusted advisor. The clients are not going to just rely on you for this stuff. They're going to believe in you. That trust that you have and that expertise that is critical for their business, that is gold. So what we like to say is that MSP should lead the compliance journey. So you're the best guy, you know the terrain, you know the shortcuts, you know all the roadblocks to that client relationship. You have the evidence, you already have access to the data and the documentation we need for compliance. And from security to other network systems, your knowledge of what's going on in those customers are going to be critical to making that journey a success. So let's talk about that value of what we can bring. Because MSPs don't just make compliance possible, when they leverage the idea of doing compliance as a service and pushing all in on this, they can actually make it faster, smoother, and affordable to their customers. And we're going to touch on some of that today. So the idea is working with an MSP that leverages compliance as a staple and as a foundation for their organization. They're going to be planning smarter. They're going to be having customers that work with them where there's not as much surprise around these compliance things. You already have access and insight to the speed of things that'll speed things up. We can deeply access your systems with your help a lot more quickly as an auditor. And then that really does drive real change. You're in a perfect position by leveraging this concept to implement improvements and really keep compliance as lean and mean as you can get it. but effective at the same time. So what we're looking at is really saying, why is this all important? Why should we believe in it? The majority of clients that MSP deal with have a compliance need. So when we look at this, make your life easier for your clients. When you handle compliance, your clients don't have to juggle multiple vendors, okay? So often what we're seeing is that when the subject of compliance comes up from an MSP relationship with their customer, they are then looking to see that relationship, that business, that project tends to actually then leave that relationship with the MSP. We look at it as saying, if you embrace that, own it, you know all the ins and outs. Make sure you have a team that can basically say, don't go outside of here. We are the trusted advisor, and through our relationships with partners such as maybe Control Case, not only can we get you ready for these things and understand them, but we can actually see you from start to finish. At the end of the day, all that's going to really do is really help boost, in our opinion, your street cred. When we're talking about helping clients stay compliant, it makes you guys as the MSP, frankly, look like a rock star. It just builds trust, and trusted brands build their businesses. So what we're looking at doing is that Control Case doesn't just want to help your clients. We really want to help you level up your own game of compliance so that you can really go out and embrace and take advantage of this. The results of some of that is going to be things like your clients are just going to be around longer. The more needs that you meet, the fewer reasons that they'll have to leave. Simple math. So, and really what it all boils down to, let's talk reality. Most of your clients are dealing with some kind of compliance requirement at the end of the day. And guess what? We could be a resource through our partnership to be that resource to say, hey, I need some help here. I need a team that can help me. So we've got you covered. The big stuff, these things that may, be very top of mind, the PCI, the ISOs, the SOX, etc. We got that covered. We can also go very specific into different industries with you. So understanding what do certain verticals and how does that relate to those specific parts of compliance, whether that's HIPAA for healthcare, FedRAMP, GDPR. We really want to do all that to make you ultimately look good. And when clients see that you can handle remediation quickly and confidently around this idea, they're going to breathe easier, they're going to stick around, and that way you're going to see not only retention for your bottom line, but growth from that remediation. So what we ultimately at Control Case want to make a promise and commitment to the MSP community, and why we're here today, is that we look at, as I said, your compliance code pilot. So what does that mean? We can fill in the gaps where whatever compliance pieces you're missing, we can help bring them to the table. You're going to stay in control. You're going to own that client relationship and that SOW. We just want to make sure we put you in a place to shine. You keep the revenue where maybe we have some potential third-party services and overlap. What we're looking at doing is not, again, taking away from your bottom line, but looking at it as a supplement to your bottom line that you maybe not necessarily can do something now, but need to learn it. Then ultimately we can tackle that at a later date, but our team can at least bridge that gap in the short term. We're really in this together. We look at it as a sell with motion as an organization. So what does that mean? What's our goal? It's really to help you grow, keep your clients happy, and really try to turn what in a lot of cases has been a negative or a subject of compliance being a chore. What I really want to do is make compliance feel less of a chore, and our team and resources can help our MSP community do that. And really what we like to do, and compliance is all about this, consistency is key. We can work with the same vendor, have the same process, work with the same data collection every time. There's no surprises. That helps everybody get to scale.
Pat, I'm good. If you don't mind, I'm gonna just add to that just a quick second. And I think it behooves us to say this, right? If you look at almost anything you do out in life, when you're looking at any kind of service, right? You want to go to a hospital. Does a hospital that doesn't have any accreditation make it any less of a hospital? Not necessarily, right? But when you want to go to a good hospital, you want to make sure that they have those letters behind, right? Some kind of placard that says, hey, we're accredited to X, right? Does a doctor that have any kind of additional certifications mean they're not a great doctor? Not by any means. But having those accreditations, being like a fellow of the American College of X, it just puts them at a little better light, right? It just means, hey, we've gone the extra effort to make ourselves shine, to make ourselves be the bigger, better professional. Again, does that make them any better? Not necessarily, but it definitely puts a spotlight on them to say, hey, this is probably somebody we should talk to. This is probably the guy I want to see. This is probably the one place I want to go do business with. So we look at so many things out there that have certifications, accreditations to them. Many times it's because clients or investors or whatever the case may be requires it. But when they're doing it on their own, it's because it's bringing in business. I mean, when you shine that light, that business is going to come to you. So I just wanted to interrupt there for a second, Pat.
Love that. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for adding that. Guys, when we're talking about certification services from a control case perspective, let's be honest. I don't know if anybody on the call has gone through one or looking. Obviously, that's why we're here. But the reality is that a lot of times compliance audits can feel like deja vu. You're answering the same questions, you're gathering the same evidence, and you're juggling a lot of different standards, like you're in the circus. To Ricardo's point earlier, when we're talking to maybe a healthcare organization that is going to need HIPAA compliance, but they're also, of course, taking money, we're going to need to look at maybe doing some PCI compliance on top of that. So what we've done in here from a control phase perspective is really looking at what we call our one audit approach. And it's really like the Swiss Army knife of compliance. One audit, multiple certifications, boom, done. So what's the big idea? Instead of doing separate audits for PCI DSS, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, what we're looking at doing is saying, let's collect the evidence once, map it across multiple regulations, and get certified for several standards at the same time. So, consider it like meal prep for your compliance diet. You do the work once, and then you can just feast all week. Okay.
Absolutely.
So what we see as a game changer for MSPs, and what we're saying is, whether it's certainly with us, we would encourage that, but anybody you're going to look at engaging from an auditing perspective, you really want to try to reduce the amount of audit fatigue that you have as much as possible. So no more repeating yourself to 5 different auditors. That just is inefficient. So let's cut some costs down, have fewer auditors, fewer invoices. We will save time where we can have less prep, less stress, and more time for actual IT work. And from our perspective, it's going to simplify yours and your customer's life. One team, one process, one happy compliance manager. So what we're looking at doing is blending smart software, managed services, and some other things that we've built from a proprietary perspective, where we map your questions across multiple frameworks. I like to sometimes say that our approach is almost like having a translator for compliance speak. You say it once and then it'll get understood everywhere. Okay. So we do have, dashboards for real-time progress, automating of the evidence collection, a lot of fun stuff that certainly we can engage with partners on a one-to-one basis. But the real message is that with one audit, at least our approach to how we, determine readiness and certification for organizations is doing this approach will result in less chaos, a lot more control, and a whole lot of time saved there.
I think it's a good opportunity, Pat, if we, kind of open it up to see, who out here on the call right now is looking at either doing any kind of compliance or being asked from it from any client, or, anything that really kind of says, look, let's focus on something. Anybody out on the call today have any concerns, questions? So I guess not at the moment.
It's okay,
but
guys.
yeah,
We will definitely want to keep this interactive. I also would say that maybe some of the muting might be an issue. So if you'd like to add anything to chat, that's fine. Thank you, Jeff, for adding that in. But back to some other stuff, and then again, please interrupt us, guys. I know we're not all on camera at the moment, but like if you want to jump in and stop, feel free to do so. So there's also some other things that we do from a services perspective, where we can look at things like ISO consulting. Think of that as like your personal trainer for ISO certifications. We can handle multi-standard assessments and readiness, sort of that combo meal of compliance, one order, and lots of different coverage. We even go as far as, looking at different technical controls and support. So in addition to that, we really, as I said, have a framework that right now is working globally against about 65, I think it might be close to 67 now, disciplines. So when we look at verticalization as far as what industries can we tackle, there's not a lot of no's with us. And so ultimately what we really want to do is provide a one-stop shop for MSPs looking to enhance their compliance offerings. And that can be from very basic to very advanced. Again, we always look at ourselves as a complement to what it is that they're doing as an MSP, and nothing at all competitive. Okay.
Yeah, Pat, Shane here on the call is asking about compliance for CMMC. Do you want to give a quick shout out to CMMC?
Yep. So yeah, guys, what we're going to do is also kind of highlight a little bit of each. Now, CMMC is probably maybe a buzz or a scenario that you're going to get a lot of questions asked about. And that's because there's been obviously, if you haven't heard about it, there's been some recent regulatory changes at the beginning of the year regarding CMMC. And we are one of the few organizations that can handle CMMC from a cert perspective in terms of that level 2 certification. It's really an industry that it's starting to become a bit of a bottleneck almost. We have a scenario where roughly just under 80,000 different organizations that are related to CMMC compliance and Department of Defense and so forth. There's only about 70 organizations globally at present. Now they're growing slowly, and there may be some things that regulatory needs to actually adjust for that. But at present, you can kind of do the math. When we're talking about 80,000, when we talk about 80,000 different organizations that could be tackling that with only about 70 to 80 or so that can certify, you can see the problem. So what we're doing is also putting ourselves out there to the channel more and more to make them aware that we are a C3PO auditor that can go through that process with an organization from start to finish and get it certified. There's some stuff that we do from a legality perspective that certain disciplines require outside auditors, but the fact is that with Control Case, we have sort of a one-stop shop where if we do have to engage a third party, we have a built-up network so that the MSP does not have to go outside of our relationship to find a person to basically get the project from start to finish. It all lives here. Okay. So let's see here, guys. This is a great question, though. Believe me, it's definitely a subject that has come up more and more. We actually were just at an industry event about a week ago, and probably 80 to 90% of the questions we were asked was actually around CMMC. So it's not surprising that it's come up. So one thing, guys, I'm going to go ahead and kind of go ahead and get out to the Jeff asked, how do we get Control Case and cost? So one of the things that we will do throughout this, Jeff, is that we do have a relationship such that every organization does have a different cost structure slightly. However, because we do have some tools that we have built out that are going to help with that scoping and understanding as quickly as we can what it is we're going to tackle from a cert perspective in terms of scope. We've developed some things that we're going to share at the end of our session here that will basically help MSPs get an understanding of that scope. And that could be for themselves as an MSP, or it also could be for their organizations they work with. We've built a tool that basically will allow us to understand the scope rather quickly so that we can get you the cost structure. We are truly an auditor and readiness organization. The software and other things that come with our relationships is inclusive. So we're not a software vendor, we are truly an auditor, but each cost and engagement has, with that scoping information, a pretty quick turnaround to understand costs. Now, how much that can be, I think generally speaking for the people on the call, getting compliant is not the cheapest thing in the world. And unfortunately, those that are going to say otherwise are probably not the best organizations to work with, because it is something that takes some time, some expertise, and some dedicated resources, but we're going to kind of go through all that today. Okay. I really wanted to show this briefly, guys, and then kind of jump into the meat of what we're going to talk about from an education perspective. I think it really is helpful to just understand that you're not alone out there. For those that have not, subscribed to them, I actually engage with a lot of different publications from the channel perspective. MSP Success, I think, is a great online, and also does have some print circulation as well. That really is a great source to kind of have for understanding industry knowledge, trends, education, things of that nature. And interestingly enough, compliance was a subject of their publication just a couple months back. Understanding and compliance, how does this ultimately turn to my bottom line being more profitable? So really the idea was, imagine you're an MSP and suddenly, all these regulations, these cybersecurity rules are coming at you like a tidal wave. So instead of running for cover, the smart MSPs of what we're seeing in this article and what we're seeing in the field are really grabbing their pickaxes, so to speak, and they're turning that into gold. And what we're seeing is that some themes that have came out of that are, what's fueling that fire? Insurance, for one. Insurance they're sending forensic teams more and more to verify the security around these things from a compliance perspective or otherwise. The idea that you were, having a scout's honor around this type of stuff it just doesn't happen today. They are done with the idea of continually paying out. So those forensic teams are going to go in and verify. When you're really adhering to some compliance regulations, that's going to make things a lot easier on you. State and federal agencies are just stepping up in general with their enforcement. And I think that the other thing is that we're seeing that the clients that they ultimately work with, they're finally realizing as well that compliance it's just not optional anymore. It's really about the survival of their business. So some other things that I thought were interesting is that, there's not one size fits all. Each people are pricing things a little bit differently. Some are doing pricing within tiers. Some are doing it as a bundle into their packages. Some are just doing straight billing by hours. And I think that really some of the things that we'll kind of touch on today is really leading with compliance in every conversation is critical, that you shouldn't wait. And that's why I applaud everybody here, because in some ways just being here today is a first step to really embracing it and really trying to make sure that you can take this journey make it as digestible and scalable for your clients as possible. So you don't necessarily have to tackle that whole adage of eating the compliance elephant. It might just need to be eaten one bite at a time. So ultimately, the final takeaway that I'll send this out on follow-up for everyone to read, but MSPs who embrace compliance, they aren't just surviving, they're really thriving. It's like turning those lemons of regulation into lemonade stands on every corner. That's what I like to say.
And to add to what I said earlier, again, there's a lot of MSPs out there, and those MSPs, when an organization is out there shopping, who are they going to point to, right? If they look at apples to apples, the differentiator might be, do they have some kind of certification in their back pocket that shows that they're doing the right thing, right? That they've been audited, that they have the controls in place. Now turn that around and make it a win for them, right? By working with us, we've already addressed certain controls. If you become certified, we've addressed those controls for you, making it easier for you to obtain your own certification attestation, as it were. And then that kind of gets into their mind, right? You've dropped a little bit of a nugget.
Yep, I love it. Yep. Okay, guys. So let's jump right into it. Now, what we're kind of talking through this is that, so you're thinking about your audit. The other thing I want to just go ahead and throw out there, just because I thought the article was very interesting, not a requirement, but it would be nice on follow-up. If anybody would be interested to just complete the same survey that the article did, it may be interesting on follow-up to kind of see where the results were in terms of the attendees versus their readership. But that said, agenda, what we're going to kind of go through is, what is it we're talking about when we say compliance? What are some of those most common cybersecurity compliance standards? Their general education on that. Why should we as MSP care about all this stuff? And really some considerations that you need to do in the front end to make sure your audit and certification will be a success. So teeing you up for actual real success there. From there, what we're going to plan to do is take a little bit of a break where it'll be about 5 to 10 minutes. We can, with the audience we have, we probably could do 5-ish to 10. But from there, what we really want to do is give everybody that chance to get refueled, get refocused, and then we're going to turn things over to Ricardo. What he's going to do is kind of work through exactly how his team approached a true SOC 2 audit, things that from best practice, but that'll also be your opportunity for interaction with him, asking questions about the actual audit process. So please do stick around. His knowledge is top notch. I have a very tough time to find people like him before I joined the organization to kind of be open to actually even having that discussion around an audit without some kind of retainer on the front end. We're not doing that. We're here to make sure that the teams understand it. We'll recap some things from to sort of, Ricardo's just talked about this a little bit. Now that we've finished this, all right, guys, let's go out and actually take advantage of this, celebrate this, make it such that people understand that we've gone the extra mile versus my competitors who have not. And then what we like to do is really tie that all together in terms of, now that we've gone through it, we're going to start, promoting it. How does this ultimately help me and my organization, and even down to the rep level? How does my team embrace this concept so that they can not only retain my customers, grow them, and also even go get some net new logos? The last thing we'll do is, of course, then talk through some of those tools. Control Case has actually built a great assessment tool for readiness around the subject of compliance based on our sort of the same principles we do with collecting evidence, where the number one question, whether it was when I was sitting in the seat with the teams from ConnectWise or today at Control Case, oftentimes the general question of why haven't you started is, well, I don't know where I'm at today. So even having just a basic ballpark of understanding, and with the MSP relationships that you guys have, oftentimes we do know a lot. We have a set of criteria and stuff in place with the MSP and the customers. So let's take advantage of what we know, tee up an idea of what we can do in the future, and that tool is going to be available to everybody here on the call. We'll also extend that anybody that is, wanting to use this tool can have an opportunity to sit down with myself as well as a other vertical lead like Ricardo for those different disciplines that we'll go over. So that said, let's go ahead and jump in. So when we're looking at diving into your first auditor certification as MSP, we kind of do say, buckle up. It's not going to be as scary as it sounds. We're not going to have any haunted servers to deal with out there, but reality is it's very fast-paced digital world. You as the MSP are basically the unsung heroes, in my opinion, and others, and you're really trying to keep the IT chaos at bay. By getting certified or audited, it's not just a checkbox, in our opinion, it's your chance to show off that you've got your stuff together. Think of it as like you're getting a gold star for being awesome at keeping things secured, smooth, and I've got happy clients. That's really what we're trying to make sure that we're teeing you up for with your client relationships. I'm just curious right now, maybe we could just even put it in chat, like for people in here, do we offer some form of formal compliance even if it's just alignment to a particular discipline? Do you have that in place now? Have you been considering that in terms of stuff for the future? Yes or no would be even, or thumbs up or fine. Because if not, we're obviously going to go into it. I'm just curious if all of these themes that we're being talked about are resonating and that stuff is on your radar. Okay, good. So what we're talking about when we're talking about cybersecurity compliance, and I know this is going to be a lengthy deck, guys. You're obviously only going to get it at the end, so feel free to take as little or as much notes as you need, or if you need any questions, let me know. But we're talking cybersecurity compliance. I know it could sound like a snooze test, but stick with me. It is not, okay? It is basically your organization's way of saying, we do have our digital act together. Here's why that kind of stuff matters, okay? It's good to keep that good stuff safe. Sounds obvious, but the reality is whether it's your customers' credit card numbers or the company's secret barbecue sauce that they have on their, for their manufacturing, compliance helps keep that all locked up and under, that metaphorical, locked up like grandma's cookie jar, jokingly. But it also is going to help the MSP stay on the right side of the law. Laws and regulations. Many industries have very strict regulations. Some of the stuff we'll touch on, GDPR, HIPAA, and they're going to mandate specific cybersecurity measures. And there's a lot of those rules, and breaking them, they're going to cost you guys big time and the customers. So, thinking of compliance. Is everything okay? We just heard somebody. That's all right. We like to say also, keeping calm, and that whole keep calm and carry on. When when the cybersecurity little gremlins, they strike, compliance is basically going to mean with that continuity that you can bounce back faster and keep things running smoothly, and essentially that you have a plan. So that is something where we want to make sure that compliance basically puts you in a place that you've got a plan for when something goes wrong. And ultimately, it's going to avoid those oops headlines that we do not want to be associated with. No one wants to be that company in the news for a data breach. And what compliance is going to do is help you dodge some of that PR nightmare by making sure that we're, really dialed in on the front end. So let's also talk about maybe something that's a little more warm and fuzzy: trust and money, because who doesn't like both of those? So what we're looking at with this also from an MSP perspective, you're going to win the hearts and minds of your customers. Showing you take cybersecurity and compliance seriously, it just does. It makes your customers feel confident, warm and fuzzy, whatever you want to call it. And it's like you're really meaning when you say, hey, your data is safe with us, and you actually mean it because you have gone through this process and you really do believe it down to your core, and you've put in place parameters to make sure that that's the case. So some other things, when you're compliant, you're going to stand out from the pack. It's sort of like that one kid that, brings his, he does his homework every day, and then that one day he also brought cupcakes on top of it for the class. So, you're going to have a competitive edge. So think competitive edge being compliance. You're going to be able to stand out from the rest of the people out there. If I'm going to pick between one and another as an end customer, to Ricardo's point, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to go with the guy that's got some accreditations on his wall versus the one that doesn't. The other part of it is that we want to really avoid that wallet wipeout, if you want to think of it that way. Fines for noncompliance, ouch. They are rough in some cases. Legal fees, top that, on top of the fine, it's a double ouch. Staying compliant really does help keep your MSP as well as your end customers, your budgets, from just frankly spontaneously combusting when it comes to being out of compliance. And then lastly, there's insurance perks. You want to have a really good, sweet cyber insurance coverage. Many of the providers, they want to see your compliance badge first. It's like a backstage pass, that you're going to be able to get even ahead of the line. Those people are going to treat you a little differently with that badge. Any questions about this at all so far, guys? And then you don't have to chime in, just making sure that if we're on pace, okay? All right. So let's talk about some of the most common cybersecurity compliance certifications out on the market. As I said, we deal with them all, but what we kind of tried to focus on was some of the most common, the ones that you might deal with more day to day. So let's talk about, we're going to deal with a little bit of an alphabet soup of compliance frameworks. But, nothing spells fun like a bunch of acronyms. So here we go. All right. So when we're talking about SOC 2, Ricardo's going to talk about this later in detail. But what I look at this is that think of this as like, trust me, I'm a secure badge. It's all about showing you've got strong controls in place for keeping data safe and sound. And it is something that I think you're seeing more prevalently maybe here in North America. But we're seeing that it also certainly being, given its due from organizations outside of the North American market. And we're seeing SOC 2 does pop up even more so in other markets because it is such a solid way to kind of get things in line. ISO 27001, that is something that is really a lot more recognized across a lot of global industries. I sometimes like to think of this one as it's the international gold standard. It's sort of like the James Bond of cybersecurity. It's got all that structure and it's globally respected, and it really does put you in a good spot. It's very similar to SOC in that a lot of that overlap is similar, but very much so a very strong and well-recognized accreditation. I just had this happen just the other day. A managed service provider came to a control case because they had a law practice that was dealing with one of their largest clients, basically came to them with the concern that as an international big customer of the law practice, that they were not working with any kind of accreditation or certification for compliancy. The result of that, though, was that we were able to help them get on a project path towards getting that, retaining their ultimate customer, and the MSP is also getting a very, very happy law practice. We're feeding all the remediation back to them, so a lot of win-wins there. But another great standard to work with. PCI-DSS, so the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Big, nice, long, complicated word. Try to say that a few times fast. But basically what we're doing here, if you handle credit cards, this is kind of like your VIP path. You're doing it really well. It's basically don't mess around, don't mess this up, or you'll be looked at very much on the hook for something for fraud, things of that nature. When we're talking about financial institutions, this is a big one. It's something that we actually even started here organizationally about 20 years ago. We have done this time and time again and have a lot of great experience. So big one there. CMMC, again, kind of touched on it earlier from a question. This has been a fast-growing need from an MSP perspective. The recent regulations that have taken place where CMMC now has a level 2 certification process. We have roughly about just under 80,000 organizations that are going to be working to that new standard. And there's only about just under 70, maybe a little higher than that now, of true organizations that can actually certify them. Think you can do the math there. This is something where there's a giant gap between supply and demand. The MSPs that we are engaging with and working with that are trying to get ahead of this curve and have a relationship with organizations that can actually take them start to finish, start having that now. Because believe me, your manufacturing clients, those that are going to be needing this, they are going to be asking about it if they haven't already. If you need any help on that type of thing, again, because it is a hot topic, we were just at some industry events last few weeks. I'd say 80 to 90% of what we had come over in some of those sessions were related to CMMC. So again, help is here if you're needing to navigate that, because that does happen with these different industries. We basically see a change due to market conditions and just upping our game. And in their particular case, we're now needing to work within a new standard, and everybody's going to have to fall in line. Those that are going to work quickly can actually take that and run with it and get some more revenue. And those that don't, I think, are going to be left behind. So get on that course now. So FedRAMP, similar. Basically, if you want to work with the U.S. government in the cloud, FedRAMP is your golden key. It's sort of almost like the TSA pre-check of cloud security, I think. There's lots of checks that happen, but sort of once you've gotten that in terms of like your achievement of getting that ability to be a FedRAMP certified organization, once you're in, you're in. Getting there is a challenge, but again, we have a team that are happy to help assist MSPs navigate that with their customers and also give them understanding of the differences between some of these, like CMMC and FedRAMP have similarities, but there is a different scope for going from one CMMC to FedRAMP. Lastly, HITRUST. So HITRUST HIPAA. These are your healthcare folks, everybody. So if you're dealing with healthcares, whether it's hospitals, urgent cares, aesthetic practices, this is the one for you. It basically keeps patient data private, and HITRUST is like HIPAA's sort of overachieving cousin. So like it's gone even further beyond that to make sure that we're covering what we need to from a critical perspective in terms of handling that sensitive healthcare information. And so these are what we see as probably 6 of the more commonly ones. But again, as we see more regulations, come up, we're happy to talk through them with anybody here on the call or afterwards. Now, we're dealing with a lot of North America, maybe MSPs on this particular call, and we have others that are working in the global market. But the other regulation that we're actually seeing more and more, in particular because the MSP communities, in terms of regionality, is starting to become a little less and less prevalent, because we see MSPs now really looking at GDPR as being something that they have to participate in, whether they actually thought they needed to or not initially. So when we're talking about GDPR or AKA the General Data Protection Regulation, sometimes it's just simply, I've had guys like say, oh, that European privacy thing. Yes, but it is actually a big deal for US MSPs also. So generally why you should care, because frankly, if you touch data from anyone in the European Union, even just one person who signed up for your company's newsletter while they were having coffee, you're in the GDPR club, whether you like it or not. Okay. And so what we try to do here is kind of just give a little bit of a fun size sort of breakdown of what we're talking about. So when it comes to GDPR, it has global reach. GDPR doesn't care where your office is. If you're handling EU personal data, you're on the hook. Okay. It's like the long arm of the law, but it does have that charming European accent, which helps. So what we're also talking about is that your personal data, that basically equals everything, names, emails, IP addresses, cookie crumbs. If you can ID someone, it's protected. Okay. GDPR is like, it really does cover everything. So it's not going to be something that some necessarily think is going to be relevant for them, but believe me, it is. It also really has rules with purpose. Okay. You've got to be clear about why you're collecting the data, how you're using it, and how long you're keeping it. Okay. It's no more just, it's just in case, like you have to be able to know all of this stuff. And, beyond that, under GDPR, users can ask to see their data, fix it, delete it, or take it with them. It's like giving them, it's like giving everyone a data remote control. Okay. When it comes to some of these breaches, the clock's ticking. Okay. If something goes wrong, you've got 72 hours to report it. And that is a small window of time to really understand what's going on. And so that is not a can I or can't I? No, it has to happen. You have to disclose it. And I don't think anyone on this call wants to be on those disclosures. So lastly, the fines. Yikes, guys. I mean, I'm talking some of these things can really hit organizations with some pretty hefty fines. It can be up to 20 million euros or 4% of their global revenue. I mean, that's not a slap on the wrist. That is you're going to get smacked with something where it could actually lead to your overall business whether it's going to survive. So yeah, GDPR may sound like a European problem, but it's not just for them. It is for U.S. MSPs as well. And it really does, I think, if you take this approach, it does put you in a place where it's sort of like your global passport for doing business responsibly in that sense. You're going to show that you're at your GDPR savviness and you're going to look like a pro. So don't shy away from this. Make sure you understand this as well, because with the way that people are being acquired from an MSP perspective, you're also likely inheriting a lot of new things day to day. And so don't ignore this one just because you think it's over across the pond, so to speak. So again, I'll break this down for GDPR, a little less legal jargon, a little more real talk when we're talking through this, but you're the data processor. So as an MSP, think of yourself, as the backstage crew of a theater. Your clients, the data controllers are the stars, but you're the one to make sure that the lights are on, the curtains are open, no one's gonna, miss their lines. You're in charge of making sure things go smoothly. I also look at this that it is a team sport. GDPR is not a solo mission. You and your clients are in this together. It's like a buddy cop movie sometimes. You are going to be working with them toe to toe, making this process easily. And when we look at things, make sure you have a data processing agreement. Something that puts in place that you have a clear, we promise not to mess this up type contract. It spells out what data you're handling, why you're handling it, how you're keeping it secure. There's no just pinky promises that it's, that you're handling it. It needs to be clear in written terms. Make sure you lock this down. You've got to bring an A game on your security encryption, your access controls, having regular audits, that whole cybersecurity buffet and of what we all play in. You got to make sure all that's dialed in and you're doing the best possible job you can, because the GDPR wants to see that you're not just winging it, and following. At the end of the day, it's all about showing your clients that you're serious about their privacy. By doing all that, it's going to build trust, loyalty, make you guys look like the responsible adult in the room. And it may sound like a chore, but it's actually a great way to level up your services, impress your clients, and make sure you don't have any of those oops type headlines for them or you as an org. Okay. I'm actually going to skip that one, guys. Kind of talk through it all the way. But the other thing that comes with penalties for GDPR, some stuff to remember. We've got a lot of, even with some of these lower scenarios, the oops price tag or fines around this stuff is not cheap. A lower tier fine could be up to 10 million euros or 2% of their global revenue. And these are for the, you should have known better type slip ups. You're forgetting to log their data. You're ghosting authorities maybe after a breach has been, publicized. Basically, this is their stern warning with a very expensive, still thing. But as you go up into this higher tier of fines, you're now talking 20 million, 4%. And really, this is also known as the you really messed up tier. Okay. These hit when you break the rules of mishandling data, sending it out, without permission, collecting info without a proper yes, I agree from the users. It's really almost, if you're in this area and you don't want to be, it's like the equivalent of dropping your phone in a volcano. It's over. So, but again, if you align to that type of stuff, you won't have to have these problems. We don't deal with the Facebooks, the British Airways, the Marriotts, and H&Ms of the world, but these are real world examples of real, teeth behind these threats. This is big money that these organizations are shelling out because of privacy. So they are not just going to hit the big boys; they're going to hit a lot of managed service providers, and you cannot be in a position to say, "I didn't know." Okay. So why should I care about all this fun stuff, Pat? So let's talk through it. Protecting sensitive data. No one wants their personal data floating around on the internet like, a lost balloon or something. When we're talking about data breaches, hackers are out there, and the standards that we're working within, like GDPR or HIPAA or PCI, what you're doing essentially is putting a blueprint for locking all those doors and setting the alarm in the house scenario. What we're going to then see from that is that your clients, they know you're following the rules. They're more likely to trust you with their data, and they're not going to be, necessarily nitpicking you around all these things. If they know that you've got your stuff together, they're probably going to be on top of it, but you need to make sure that they're aware of it. When we're talking about the legal and regulatory requirements, why it matters, it's really important because, the oops, we didn't know, that just doesn't hold up in court or otherwise. We have to avoid penalties, having those fines hit, that is a massive hit to an organization. And that's, when we're talking about 4% of their global revenue, that's not a typo. That is a big number. So even if we're talking smaller organizations, that is a massive hit to their budgets, and let's avoid it. We really want to help, when you're talking about this, know your industry, making sure that we give a clear understanding that certain verticals, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, everybody's going to have their own different types of ways of doing it, but making sure that you know the differences between them is critical. Standardizing your security practices and why that matters. Winging it is not a strategy for cybersecurity, and neither is compliancy. So compliance standards are like the best, the greatest hits of security. They're tried, they're tested, and they're trusted. We want to make sure that we're putting those in place. The consistency that comes with that is that everyone's on the same page. Okay? We have fewer gaps, fewer surprises, and really a lot of that. We don't want to have those people looking at each other as like, wait, what were we? Who was supposed to do that? If you've asked that question out loud, you're going to be in trouble. When we're talking risk management, you can't fix what you don't know is broken. So having a risk assessment or a regular assessment to help you spot those weak spots is critical, because believe me, the bad guys are going to look too. So you want to be ahead of that before they do. So once you know the risks, you can actually do something about them, like, patching the holes and locking the doors and, all that fun stuff metaphorically. The operational efficiency that you'll get out of this, guys, is really improved. It really is real. Chaos is not a business model. So compliance standards, what they're going to do is really streamline the process and let you have standards that will basically, ditch the duct taping spreadsheet style of, tackling compliance with not a lot of real firm standards. Everything's going to run smoother, faster, and with a lot fewer wait, who was supposed to do that moments if you actually work on your compliance packages. And we also really do encourage, as part of that, you want to not look at this as a project completion, now we're good. There's going to be continuous improvement that needs to happen. So regular audits, they're performed on a quarterly basis, whatever the case is. You want to have that cadence up so that you're not just looking at this as a one-time thing. It is an ongoing process, and making sure you're doing those health check-ins on your compliance customers throughout the year, making sure that they're still in line is critical. You don't want to be reactive, you want to be proactive. Your reputation, why it matters, because looking good in compliance makes you look really good in the market, okay? While other MSPs are still trying to even maybe figure out what we just talked about on those previous slides and don't necessarily even know what GDPR stands for, you're already certified. You're sipping coffee, you're talking to clients about it, how it's going to help them, how it's going to enhance their security, and you're going to have it from a seat of confidence. Being known as the MSP that actually gets compliance, that's a very good look. It's not going to be something where you're going to look bad by doing that, obviously. And when it comes to client retention, happy clients don't leave. On top of that, they tell their friends and colleagues about it. So when clients are working with you and they've engaged in a service or project around their compliance, they know that they are keeping their data safe and that their regulators are going to be happy because you've done it in the proper way. So they're going to stick around. It is not something that they want to necessarily do again. You're the trusted advisor. Why do it twice when I could just do it once with you? And you really become less of a vendor before, in terms of that type of relationship where it can't feel like you're really integral to their business. That will go away. You're going to become less of a vendor and more of a trusted sidekick to actually do this project. The compliance standards in general, as a result, are just going to raise your bar. Your service quality is going to go up. I almost like a small example would be like, back in the day, we all had flip phones and then one guy had the iPhone. It's similar. Everything's just going to work better. And lastly, some things on financials. Why does it matter? Because saving money and making money, love those two things personally and in business. So I would love to save money and make more money. So by avoiding fines and breaches, cost savings are there. More money for things you actually need for the business, or better for tools, or whatever the case is. There's also revenue growth there. Clients that are working with compliant MSPs it just opens the door to more deals, closing of deals. It just makes your team look like a rock star. As a person that was out there in the field helping people sell, if I had something that really put me a cut above my competitors in terms of what I know and how I deliver from an IT perspective, I want to have that information at the forefront. But I have to have an organization that has been a committed or to kind of put me in a position to go out there and say that. By doing this, you can. Okay. Any questions, guys? I know a lot to go over, a lot has gone on so far. Figuring no, but happy to answer any questions because this will be the sort of the last section before we start getting things for a break, and we'll turn things over to Ricardo. Okay. All right. Some key considerations for ensuring that you're going to be set up for success. This is really important stuff. Okay. So compliance challenges. Okay, guys, we can tackle this as a pro. Okay, every MSP is going to face a few bumps on their road to compliancy, but don't worry. Okay, we've got some stuff to look out for to give you a game plan to turn those bumps into smooth sailing. So, some gaps in compliance. All right, the challenge. Sort of almost like, wait, we missed that. What? How do we miss that in the last audit? Okay, the fix would be thinking of this as like your pregame warm-up, your gaps. So do a pre-audit assessment to spot the weak spots before that, the referee or the auditor shows up, okay? Using those compliance tools like a digital playbook, it helps you run regular internal audits to stay sharp, okay? So staying ahead of that on the front end, because if you don't know what you don't know, when we turn things over to an auditor, it's going to be a quick conversation, okay? Documentation issues, okay? The challenge here usually is, where's that one form from last year? That one thing, and I can't find it, okay? So what we really want to do is make sure you've set up a system in which, whether it's through maybe a relationship like Control Case or otherwise, you have one place of central documentation, one place to rule them all, okay? You got to keep it tidy, updated, and that the link docs directly, that you have links that directly work to your audit checklist. And it's basically just turning in paperwork that keeps it very well organized. Okay. Resource crunch. Okay. This tends to be the challenge. I've got 3 people, 2 weeks, and one giant audit coming up. How am I going to do all that? So probably the likelihood of that question, if you were sitting there and asked that question, really, with 3 people, 2 weeks, and a giant audit coming up, you're probably not going to do it. So the fix is you really want to build that compliance sort of dream team, okay? You want to make sure you assign a project manager, loop in key departments, to this process. You're going to have different people within the organization that might have different, touches to the process, whether it be from a policy and procedure perspective or a technical data perspective. So the idea is loop everybody in, get those key departments in loop with whatever's going on, and if needed, bring in an outside expert. That could be something where maybe a Control Case is a part of it. We can be the people that come in and really become an extension of your team. Our attitude is that our team is your team. So with all that set up and you have clear timelines and smart planning, you can basically balance those audits and make sure that it goes off well. Okay. Couple more, I promise, then we're going to get back. We're going to have a break, okay? So some other things that are going to be challenging for you guys out there. Keeping up with the regulatory changes. That is a fun problem that MSPs might have to deal with. So I had a guy that basically told me, when we talked about something related to, he's like, Jesus, man, wait a minute, they changed the rules again? Yeah, they did. Okay. Sometimes compliance, we laugh, is that it is a feeling of flying a plane while building the plane. Okay. So stay in the loop, become if you're going to tout yourself as being a compliance ready shop, make sure you understand things. Subscribe to industry newsletters, join professional groups, attend webinars and trainings similar to this one. And update your policies, making sure you're keeping current on everything based on all that feedback. Big one also, just simply internal communication, guys. If you're, in a position where it's time to do this again, who was supposed to do that again? Was it somebody? Is it time to establish a channel where there's a clear team captain, so to speak, of my compliance stuff? You really need to build a communication game plan where you have regular updates to those key individuals that are going to tackle this project and service offering for you as an MSP. Make sure they have clear roles and open feedback. But we would also say, host quick training sessions, like thinking of your compliance huddles once a week. Making sure that everyone knows that they're a part of the team, they're part of the playbook, they understand that we're going to keep adding to their information so they can go out armed and be able to tackle a complicated subject and be the expert in front of their customers. Cost management, okay? Big one here, of course. So challenge here is like, why does this audit feel like it's just draining my budget, okay? The fix here is that you guys really need to look at it as treating it like a project and not a surprise expense, okay? When we're looking at compliancy, oftentimes it is something that has been put off, it hasn't been embraced, and then suddenly it's forced upon us, and now we're in a completely different budgetary discussion, and we're having challenge of whether we can actually go forward or not. So build a detailed budget, okay? Know what you're spending and why. Allocating funds smartly, making sure that your consultancy relationships, your tools, things of that nature all align towards this, and track those costs like a hawk, okay? Making sure you understand them, because it can spin out of control if you're not watching it. So smart planning equals no sticker shock, okay? Bottom line here, the MSPs that stay informed, that communicate clearly, and they manage their costs well, they really turn their audits from really stress fests that can kind of be looked at as a negative into a real success story. And each one of you do have the tools and the teams, and hopefully after today, a strategy to start thinking about, and we'll go, from there with your team. So how long is this going to take? Prep time, okay, guys? Every one we do scope a little bit differently. We do have a team that generally knows what's going to work and what's not. But think of it like training for a marathon. That's how I would equate it. 6 to 18 months of prep, depending on how big and complex you as an MSP or your client are. I'm going to say, if some of you are thinking that's a long time, you're right. It is a long time. And that's why the projects are as serious as they are, because they are treated as such. But greatness does take time, and we can basically help facilitate that. So the actual audit, that's the race. The actual audit it can take a few weeks to a few months with some, little bonus rounds for follow-ups and fixing some stuff that you didn't know was broken. The ongoing maintenance of it is a good thing. You don't just get to, get a trophy, walk away. Compliance is what we say is a lifestyle. You're going to live it, breathe it, similar to probably what your commitment was a few years ago for some that were industry. Like, we're all in on security. And that's just fundamentally how we are. Similar can be for that. The ongoing maintenance part of this is a revenue generator, and continuous compliance and education around that, where we can do maybe some quarterly vulnerability scans, some annual pen tests. These things make sure that we're not only maintaining, but we're also proactively trying to make sure that there's no holes that we need to fill. So who's going to do all this? Way again, we look at is make sure you have your own dream team, someone to lead the charge, plus folks from your IT, if you have a compliance department, your HR teams may be involved, and really anybody that organizationally is going to know where some of those skeletons or outdated policies are buried. Okay. The training time, we look at this as everyone in the organization needs to know what's going on. And so no one gets to say like, wait, we're doing an audit now, or like they need to know about this well in advance, the importance of it, the benefits of it, so that no one's just thinking this is just another project we throw on the pile. It's something that needs to be given priority. So some pro tips for sort of not losing your mind, as it were. Bring in the pros when needed. Some external consultants, like maybe got myself, Ricardo from Control Case, or others. They can really help you avoid a lot of those rookie mistakes that we're talking about from a compliance perspective, and maybe even save you some sanity. Practicing makes perfect. The internal audit process that we look at and encourage is like a dress rehearsal. So make sure you go through some internal stuff, because it's sort of better to trip over your own policy now than during a real incident. Okay, so making sure that you're doing that proactively is important. Solid communication between the stakeholders, and again, making sure you're setting aside funds for consultants, tools, and other things that might need to be tackled from now and again. Okay, guys, what to expect as we walk through an actual SOC 2. I'm going to briefly talk through this at a high level. Then we're going to have a brief 5 to 10 minute break. We'll see how the time looks, and then we're going to turn things over to Ricardo. Okay. So now that we've kind of built a foundation and we're ready to go, and again, Ricardo's going to expand on all this in detail. But when we're talking about SOC 2, this little adventure you're about to go on, think of it as a security report card for your organization, is sometimes how I like to put it. Except instead of grades, you get trust, credibility, and a whole lot of peace of mind with that. So what we say is step one, do your homework and try to have some fun with it if you can. Before you dive in all the way, learn the basics from people like Ricardo and others, from a strategic auditor. Get to know the 5 what we call trust service criteria. They're the pillars, the foundation of SOC security. So keeping it simple, are we locking the doors digitally, so to speak? Availability is another one. Can your systems handle that heat? That bandwidth. Processing integrity. Are your systems doing what they're supposed to? Confidentiality. Can you keep a secret, essentially? And your privacy. Like, are you respecting the people's personal info? Make sure you find your focus. Not every organization needs to meet all 5 criteria right away. So ask yourself, what do we do? What data do we handle? What do our customers care about? We then make sure you pick the criteria that matters most, that is in your audit scope. It's sort of like choosing a major in college sometimes for compliance. So getting SOC 2 ready isn't just about checking the boxes. It's all about leveling up your entire security game. And so here's how we kind of look at taking that. So first, a gap analysis, your readiness check, your reality check. Think of it as your before photo. If you're comparing it to when you are now and where you're going to be in SOC 2. So, spoiler alert to everybody. Everyone has gaps, okay? The goal is to find them before the full auditor does when we're talking about a gap analysis. For risk assessments, now that we know what's missing, it's time to ask, what could go wrong? Okay, you'll look to each, criteria, and you're going to figure out where those risks are hiding. What we can then do is tag on some things from a continuous compliance perspective after we fill those gaps, because SOC 2 isn't a set it and forget it type deal. It's more like brushing your teeth. It's got to be done regularly, and that's the only way you're going to do things to keep things healthy. Documentation, keeping the receipts, every fix, every update, every decision, write that down. Your stakeholders. SOC 2 is a team sport, okay? Keeping your stakeholders in the loop, as we've mentioned. Planning. Make sure you've developed a detailed plan, and our teams have been able to assist them. Not, you wouldn't go on a road trip without a map, right? Same thing goes for these types of things with SOC. This is where we're going to build, that compliancy plan. Implementation, okay? Think of this as installing the locks and alarms and motion sensors in your sort of digital house, okay? Whether it's access restrictions, encryption, monitoring tools, this is where, your security is going to go from to like, okay, we're now up here. We want to make sure that we have your current setup. When it's not going to cut it, it's okay. This is your chance to upgrade your outdated systems, streamline that clunky process, and align everything with SOC 2 standards. It's like a good renovation, okay? Now, we've done the internal audit. We're going to do sort of that dress rehearsal. We've done that successfully. Now we're going to basically just select an auditor. You're going to choose your compliance co-star. It is a critical part of the process. Picking the right auditor is sort of like casting a lead in your movie. You want somebody that's going to want to know, they're going to know their lines, they're going to hit their marks, they're not going to flinch under pressure. So you want to look for someone with SOC 2 experience and not just, an audit experience. Bonus points if they, of course, work with MSPs. But think of them as your compliance coach, not a referee. And basically, after all that's said and done, you're going to be able to go out with a very, committed program that shows I've done everything I can to be certified in this thing. Now I'm going to go out and tell the world about it. Okay. Informing my stakeholders that we've completed this project. It's a success. How do we make sure that the people know we're doing it? And it's not a destination. It's continuous improvement, annual check-ins, and that your teams and your customers will appreciate. Okay. I know that's a lot, guys. It is just before 12:27, it looks like. I would say, how do you feel, guys? 5 minutes?
I think that works. I think that works best, Pat.
Okay. All right, guys. Look, we will go ahead and pause off of camera. We'll just leave the deck here, and then let's come back at 12:35. Let's call it, and then we'll go ahead and get started, and then we'll let Ricardo do his thing. He's going to show you a lot of good things around how we approach the SOC, answer your questions, and really kind of delve into this deeper. So look forward to it. See you back in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. I got my mic working, by the way.
Oh, good.
Excellent.
All right.
All right.
See you guys in about
we'll
5
be
minutes.
back in just a few.
All right, thanks.
Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started, Ricardo. Guys, thank you for, again, being patient with us and going through a lot of information today, but I think this is really where we're going to have a lot of great opportunity to hopefully get some more insight from a true auditor's perspective. So Ricardo is obviously working with my organization 11 years with Control Case, but has over 20 with a lot of great experience from healthcare, banking, data center technology, has a focus in privacy and data related matters, and he is our lead from a SOC 2 certification perspective on our team. So That said, I'm going to turn things over to him, and you can just let me know when to advance, okay? Ricardo, sorry, I'll
Sounds good.
be driving.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Pat. All righty. So, when we get into discussing SOC, you have to think about, as Pat's been mentioning multiple times, right? What's in it for you? The return on investment, knowing what compliance framework to go for. As you noticed earlier, there's a variety, right? Some are specific to certain industries, right? Healthcare. You have high trust. You have HIPAA. You look at working with payment cards, credit cards. You have to go through PCI. The two big players out in the marketplace that are kind of industry agnostic and open to pretty much any kind of business are primarily ISO 27001 and SOC 2. But what sets the two apart is a little bit where people really have a hard time determining which one to choose. Previously, it was where it depends where you are geographically. So if you're international, meaning Europe, South and Central America, Africa, Asia, what have you, you'd primarily look at ISO 27001 because it's the prevalent regulation out there, right? It's what's known, not just 27001, but ISO's known for regulatory compliance in just about any space. Fast forward to about 20 years ago when the AICPA brought in what used to be known as SAS 70, later became SOC 2. And then you start really thinking about, okay, so which one do I go for? Well, what really sets the two apart is that ISO is very prescriptive. It tells you really what to do, what you're required to do. SOC does not. The other big difference between the two is that ISO really says, okay, as of today, so when we look at controls, everything is in point in time, meaning as of today, we can confirm as an auditor that you have all your controls in place, right? The SOC 2 goes a little bit different. So ISO or SOC 2 plays into not really prescriptive. It kind of says, here are the controls or the criteria that are required. It doesn't really say that you have to have certain things implemented, but they want a control in place that addresses the criteria, right? Second to that, it is not as a point in time. It actually goes retrospective looking, saying, hey, for a period of time in retrospect, usually a year, how did you fare? How were your controls doing? Meaning, if you did it for the last year, more than likely, you're not going to change it up tomorrow once the audit's done and kind of revert, right? It means that now you're really kind of doing it day to day. It's happening consistently, which means it's a little more assurance that the controls are in place for the long run. So how do you start to plan for one of these engagements, right? I firmly recommend, and maybe I should take a step back, right? We're control case. We're a third-party auditor. We do compliance work in many respects. But today's conversation here is forget us, right? This is not meant to be a sales pitch. It is really meant to be, what does an MSP need to do to prepare for these kind of engagements? So select control case, select another auditor. Obviously, we would love to work with you, but really, what should you do regardless of the auditor you select? You should go for a gap assessment. Many times we have found that first-time organizations doing a SOC 2 simply just don't know where they lie, right? So it's good to do a gap assessment to really see where your controls are faring today. That way, when you get into the audit, you really know what needs to be done, any controls that need to be implemented because maybe they were just missing, you didn't know. Maybe they were implemented but not very well implemented, so you need to do some remediation work. So it behooves you to do a gap assessment, right? And there's a lot of information, by the way, in these slides. I'm not going to talk verbatim to them, just kind of go through the overview, and then you can review them on your own once they're shared. If you want to get into the next, so one of the first things you need to do when deciding to go for a SOC 2 is selecting the right trust service criteria. The service criteria are 5, and one of them is an absolute must. You can't do a SOC 2 without it, which is security, right? It's kind of the baseline. So security. The other 4 are availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. And we'll talk about what goes into each one of them again in a little bit high detail, and you can look at the slides for more specific. Next slide, please, Pat. So let's talk a little bit about security specifically, right? Again, it's a requirement, it has to be included in every kind of SOC 2. It focuses on protecting the data and the systems, right? Think physical security, think logical security, think how to protect the data, how to protect our assets from breaches of any kind, right? Internal or external. And with that, we're obviously thinking access, disclosure, damage, any kind of thing that can disrupt the system in and of itself, okay? Next slide. And this will give you some ideas of what things we're looking for when you talk about the security trust service criteria. We're talking doing things such as penetration and vulnerability assessments to gauge the security impact on the system. We're talking firewalls, how to protect the perimeter, IDS, IPS, and all of that has to do also with documentation. So really around your information security policies, computer use policies, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. Then we talk about availability. Availability is really just the uptime of the system. And when you're looking at selecting the right trust service criteria, it has to do with what commitments you're making to your clients, what commitments they need from you. So if your system is one that says, look, for the livelihood of me to be able to work, I need to make sure that my computers, my servers, my databases are available 24/7, that they're available, during service hours only. Anything of that nature that really says I'm making a commitment to my clients to have a certain availability is when you want to address availability as a trust service criteria. Next slide there. So how do we test that? What things do we look at? We look at testing your incident response plan, right? If you had an incident, how could you recover from it? How quickly can you recover from it? And that really plays into the availability part. Your backups, if you don't have good backups, again, how can you come out of any kind of situation, be it a power outage, being a breach, et cetera. Next. Then let's talk about processing integrity. So processing integrity, think about it in kind of 2 terms. One of them, think manufacturer, right? If you're creating something, be it a nut, right? A bolt and nut. You want to make sure it's exact, right? It's replicated 1,000 times a minute. So you want to have the specifics. You want to make sure you know how it's happening. Is there quality checks to make sure that there's no burrs on that bolt that then is not going to let it work with the nut? If you translate that into data, think of a financial, right? If you have financial information, if you are processing payments, if you're doing reporting, anything of that nature, how are you ensuring that data, when you get any set of numbers going through your system, are there any automated or manual checks to make sure that the data that you're bringing in is at the end of the run still the same data at the end, even if it's parsed or whatever the case may be. So you want to make sure that there's some kind of integrity through the process of processing that data. Okay. So what do we do to check that? How do we test it? Thank you, Pat. Next slide there. How do we do it? It's all about the QA process on the back end. It's about systems that are monitoring your processing. Okay. Again, be it automated or manual. Next slide. Then we talk about confidentiality. And I think security versus confidentiality, right? To give you a little bit of context. Think of you going to your doctor's office. So security is all about keeping that door to the doctor's office when you're at your most vulnerable, keeping it locked, keeping it secure from somebody opening that door. But what you talk to the doctor of your aches and pains or any issues that you may have, you want to keep that information confidential, right? So it's the same kind of concept. It's about keeping your client's data, your own system's data, your as Patrick said, that secret sauce recipe. How do you keep it from other people gaining it that can be used against you or to compete against you or whatever the case may be? So how do we work to ensure that? We test things such as encryption through in transit, keeping the encryption at rest, certificates, two-factor authentication, things of that nature. Okay. Next slide. We've talked a little bit about the cryptographic solutions, the physical access controls, etc. Next slide. And then we have privacy. Privacy is really about keeping PII especially secure. It's not just about keeping it secure, it's what we're doing and how we're processing that data. So think GDPR, the whole concept that Pat gave around GDPR. If you have a privacy program, so if you're collecting data from individuals, how are you managing that data? Starting from, is there an opt-in, opt-out piece when you're about to take on a new client? Do they have the option to it? Are you giving them a notice as soon as they're going to sign into your service? Is there a dedicated privacy officer that they can reach out to in case of any requests for information on their data, et cetera, et cetera. So it all revolves around the program around privacy. Okay. So in many regards, internationally, a SOC 2 with privacy in there can start the process of addressing your GDPR needs as well. Okay, next slide. And so what do we test? What are things that need to be in place for privacy? It's not an all-inclusive list, but it includes notice and communication, choice and consent. How are we collecting? What are we using your data for? How long are we going to keep it? Are we sharing the data with anybody? And then your right to audit is obviously part of that as well. Okay, next slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what benefits you get out of the SOC 2 in the MSP world. All right, so again, when you look at the effectiveness, the operational effectiveness of compliance standards, be it ISO, be it SOC 2, again, it really revolves around making sure they address the need. What are you looking for? What are your clients looking for from you? Again, if you look at working internationally, Europe, Latin America, so on and so forth, it might be a better fit for you to work against ISO 27001. But again, nowadays, the international community is looking at SOC in a more favorable light, especially because we have equivalency with the international standards, be it the International Accountancy Board, be it against the Canadian Board of Auditors, etc. So it's really around streamlining the operating efficiencies. And here's where we come into play with the one audit aspect that Pat had talked about earlier too, right? ISO and SOC work very well off of each other. They complement each other very well. So if you're working, a stronghold in the US and are really trying to grow internationally, yes, SOC 2 can address the need, but maybe it's beneficial to bring in ISO 27001 to complement it, right? So now you have a more de facto, if you would, US standard and a more, I guess, default international standard. Make them work together so that your clients, your clients' clients can see and reap the rewards from it. Pat? And you want to take over here, Pat? You're on mute, just in case.
Yep. I'll add to that, guys. Thank you, Ricardo. I think when we're looking at benefits, whether we're talking about ISO or SOC 2, we're really looking at cleaning up, a lot of things from the chaos and also reducing a lot of redundancy. So what we're looking at doing is, even though every client has their own special way of doing things, your team as an MSP was, looking at running a lot of different playbooks at the same time. It's like juggling a lot of different things at the same time. So basically, right, if you commit to this concept and really look at standardizing in that sense, where we can unify the processes and have one playbook to sort of rule them all, we're going to have consistent security and everyone gets that same high quality protection. No more of those, oh, we forgot that one client's weird firewall rule, and then here we are. Making sure that everything is there. The streamlined operations really help with those standardizations. Your team's not going to reinvent the wheel, every Monday when you come in. It's a little more like cruise control when we're talking about this type of commitment. And you're really going to be ultimately, in the day, having an ability to stop sort of duct taping solutions together and really start using your people and tools where they can really make a difference. It's like going from a really lot of chaotic group projects to really a nice dialed in, well-oiled machine with fewer headaches, better security, and just better ability to sleep at night. So all that said, I know we at least wanted to give the opportunity for any engagement or questions specifically for Ricardo on maybe recent audits or other projects. If not, that's okay, but at least wanted to open up the dialogue. Can be in chat or on, certainly talk through it. But any questions you have for our auditor as far as anything specific that maybe needs a little more information on?
I guess, yeah, my only question would be, and maybe it's come up a little bit better when we get to the monetization. Hopefully we got some time for that one still. But sweet. But yeah, I guess I think my biggest challenge is, our current clients are tend to be a little bit on the smaller side, so they might be like like a small doctor, that type of thing. And sometimes just even though all these things are required by law is great, but the problem, a lot of times they just don't have the budget for these things, and sometimes they can't even make the budget. Sometimes I do think they are a little bit short on the money. Same thing, I had a problem with the insurance companies that they went in and told them about the issues. That I think that's half my problem, that one of my challenges there. And then the other challenge with the insurance was basically that I think they might have had some cyber liability that let them sneak by, or maybe their old IT person just said they were compliant, so they just checked the boxes even though I went there, and they had no encryption. They their computers weren't automatically locking. Pretty much basically had very little. All they had was maybe an antivirus that might or might not be managed, but beyond that they really didn't have anything at all.
Yep.
Sure. That's a great point. Go ahead, Ricardo. You tell.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. So from a budgetary standpoint, Pat and the control case team, we've created different scenarios for different needs, right? A conversation around what is it specifically that you're looking for? Sometimes it's, look, I need the bare minimum to just get me started and kind of grow from there. We've built those things. We've already been doing that with other clients and it works.
Okay.
Going for monthly billing as opposed to basically making it a monthly recurring as opposed to an annual budget type thing. When you talk about those deficiencies, if you would. So again, SOC, because it's very different than ISO. ISO says you're certified or you're not, right? Because you passed or you didn't pass. SOC doesn't quite do that. So with a SOC report, you could get a report that says, look, there's some deficiencies. Depending on the level of deficiencies, it may still be a quote unquote clean report, even though you have some deficiencies in there, and your customers are okay with that, right? Because hey, you had we found that one of your policies was out of date. Is it, in the grand scheme of things, is it a major deficiency? No, but those are the kind of things we call out in the report. So again, working with you, working through trying to identify those things. We work with you throughout the process to avoid or minimize the impact on those things. And so that's where we kind of use that term partnered approach. We obviously can't become partners in the great sense, because obviously we're a third-party auditor and we need to make sure that we have independence and so what we're saying actually is. But at the same time, we're looking to work with you to make sure that you get a great outcome at the end of this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Jeff. I think that's a great question. I think the one thing that I sort of start to, and it's a challenge in and of itself, is that a lot of I'm not speaking to you specifically, a lot of MSPs will somewhat try to position themselves as a compliance authority without having done compliance themselves. And so I look at it as sometimes how do you go, like I'm a bigger guy. I'm on my weight loss journey. I didn't go to a trainer though that weighed more than me. So I want to make sure that I'm working with somebody that can speak from an authority that resonates. So some of that can be challenging to get for an MSP at different scales of their own maturity in terms of when they want to tackle that. So it's similar to their customers. But I also think it's important to at least make the commitment that this is a path that we are going to go down as an MSP eventually. It could be that you need to start with, really standardizing your assessments, keeping it a little bit more manageable from time to time. The other part I think that's really important, which kind of does lead me into sort of where I'm going next, was, now that we've kind of completed this, okay, let's go out there and tell people that we are, we went through all this effort. What I find, and what I think Ricardo finds funny sometimes, is that, they will do all that work and not tell anybody. It's sort of surprising me. It's, the question is like, how do you currently communicate to your compliance achievements to your customers? If your strategy is, we mention it once on our proposals and hope they notice, we can do better than that. We can absolutely do better than that. So what we're saying is, think badges, think trusted pages, think of the humble brags on LinkedIn. Clients love knowing that you've got your act together. Yeah. And so I think that what we like to see is, when we're talking about that, it's, everybody's moving real fast in this digital world. There's thousands of customers. There's thousands of competitor MSPs. I think what we're trying to say is that if you've gone through all this and this effort, you need to not, make this as a cybersecurity compliance isn't just a nice to have. This is a competitive advantage to you. Why, how do I stand out from the crowd? getting that certification like a SOC 2 or an ISO, it shows you're not just talking about it. You're walking it. You're compliant. You're on top of it. You're going to build trust like a real boss. Clients love knowing that their data is safe. Compliance is saying we've got you covered. And what we see is that ultimately what we're all here for is to win more business. When you're certified, you're not just like every other MSP down the block. You're the MSP that clients will want to work with. I think there's been a lot of things that ConnectWise even puts out that from a polling's perspective, and it is without question that a end customer will leave an MSP for the right cybersecurity stack. And I look at that as basically saying that if you go beyond that even further and say a compliance stack, you're now even more of a differentiator. So let's not keep this a secret. Shout your compliance wins from the rooftops. Let clients know what it means for them. Less risk, more peace of mind. A partner as an MSP they can count on. Having compliance should equal confidence. It helps you grow your clients, retain your clients, and really build a long-term relationship that actually lasts. They're going to stick to you like glue when they know that they've gone through what could be, a well worth it but very laborious project. They're not going to do that again. They're going to want to stick with you as the trusted source.
One of the ways that I've seen very, very few MSPs or other organizations do is, for example, when you're looking to win new business, one of the first things they ask you to do is a vendor risk assessment, some kind of security paperwork, what have you, usually in the form of an Excel spreadsheet filled with different questions on how do you address controls. Well, instead of that, when you're responding to RFPs, when you're looking to respond to contracts, put your the SOC or ISO or whatever logo right on your name, right on the front page of your proposal, and say we are SOC certified. When looking to address your vendor risk assessment or your vendor risk questionnaire, we can leverage our report for that. So it automatically sets you and it should set you a little different, right? It should be a differentiator for you in trying to win that new business.
Yeah, exactly. So, think of your certifications as you're getting that gold star as the MSP. Let's put that on the refrigerator. I want to be able to know about it. So, and I think there's honesty out here as well. Let's be real. Everyone says they're secure, but not everyone has the receipts that verify that they actually are. That's where the certifications come in. It's like a blue check mark on the cybersecurity proof. We're real deal. So, when it comes to marketing materials, brag a little. You have earned it. Put those certification logos front and center on their website. Put them in brochures and flyers showing that, we're certified. Here's why that's awesome for you guys as an MS, as a customer of ours. Client presentations, show it off without showing off, slide it into a section that says, here's how we're certified to protect your data. Tell stories of how your certifying process really kind of saved the day, where you can basically show that, when something went wrong, these things that you've made a commitment to helped the customer. Spread that word, communication across, email campaigns, hey, we're certified. Here's what that means for your peace of mind. You can sleep at night as a customer of ABC MSP. Social media, post it, hashtag it, I don't know, maybe meme it or something. Let the world know that your security game is strong. That puts you in a very unique spot. The sales conversations, train those sales guys. And I'm going to touch on that here in a minute, because ultimately I want the guys that are also out there feeding pipeline to your business, understand why this is good for them. So, train your sales team on, dropping those certifications into conversations, sort of like name dropping, you're worried about it. Funny enough, we're SOC 2 certified. That's going to carry weight. Having answers, or FAQ that the team's ready about, what does that mean? Think of it as, make a compliance cheat sheet, where we can, we'd be happy to even help with that at times, where we can help partners. The client onboarding process, include your certifications in their welcome kit, like, hey, you made the right decision. It reinforces it. You're deciding to come here to keep your data safe. We're gonna, that's why you're gonna sleep better at night working with us. Do training sessions. Hope hosting quick webinars or lunch and learns on, not just here's what we do, but here's how it benefits you, customer ABC. Having those digital badges, things of that nature, those shiny cert logos that Ricardo mentioned, putting those on your website, putting it on your email signature, putting it out there like you're a winner, at the marketing cybersecurity Olympics, making sure that people are aware. Bottom line is that certifications, they're not just for auditors. They're your brand's bragging rights. So don't be shy, show them off, talk them up, and use them to build trust from day one.
Hey, Pat,
Okay.
I know we need to also kind of do a time check, because I know we're over time and we have to be respectful of everybody's time and availability here. So, I know we're kind of,
I think we're going to be wrapping
almost
up
10 minutes over. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some time here. So, guys, I'm going to go into really just the last portion of it, but a critical piece to it. We've done all this work. We're ready to shout to the rooftops that we're now a compliant organization and all the benefits. So now, how do I make money off of all this fun stuff? So, unlocking revenue. Let's be honest, compliance, it doesn't exactly sometimes scream fun, honestly, but for MSPs, it is a gold mine in disguise, okay? Here's how, you can really turn those regulations into revenue. And, the problem is that we're honestly leaving a lot of money on the table. A lot of MSPs are doing the hard work. They're managing systems. They're securing networks. But when, it comes to that compliance part of it, they're just like, we'll let somebody else handle that. Okay. Huge mistake. Big, huge mistake. What we're saying is that once you've committed to this and built up a foundational understanding, you can offer compliance as a service. Okay. That is a total game changer for your MSP. Okay. You're going to see new revenue streams. We're going to do assessments. We're going to do remediation against those assessments, and we're going to deal with some ongoing services. Cha-ching, that's money for us. Okay. We're going to have stickier clients. What I mean by that is that, helping them to be compliant, they're not going to leave you. The likelihood of them leaving you and going through another experience with another organization, highly unlikely. So the fact is, you're going to have less churn, and you can become sort of their go-to-market for all things secure and compliance certified. So build up their business. And of course, the competitive edge that we talked about before. Your clients are going to like to know that they're working with a provider that knows their way around SOC 2 or HIPAA, and they're a pro. Okay. So again, bottom line being that compliance isn't just a checkbox. It's really a big business opportunity. Okay. By offering this, you're not just helping your clients stay out of trouble. You're building that trust. You're boosting revenue. And really what we're wanting to do is put them in a position where you're the MSP that basically has become the one they can't live without. Okay. That's going to take some time to build up. But when we're looking at monetizing, there's a lot of ways we can do that from a money-making perspective. So how do we turn those regulations into revenue? professional services. What is that really? You're the fixer. You're the compliance mechanic, the one who shows up when the client's security posture is a little more than audit ready, okay? When we've got a healthcare provider that needs to be HIPAA compliant, you guys can swoop in, audit their setup, patch the holes, update policies, encrypt the sensitive stuff, train the team, and, boom, we're going to get a compliance thing. And what we're really wanting to do is, one, give you the opportunity to gain those professional services. Next, we're going to basically say, well, now we're going to fill some more gaps with maybe some product and some other things from a managed security perspective. So you've helped them get compliant. Now you're going to help keep them staying compliant. Like I mentioned before, like that personal trainer that I have to work with. It's the personal trainer for your cybersecurity and compliance help. So those recurring services are going to basically be a huge part of your revenue. So that same healthcare provider we were talking about, now you're on like a monthly recurring plan with them. You're monitoring their network logs. You're running regular audit checks. You jump in for more stuff, and that can balloon up to more things with, PSA and other things. We're talking VAR-based services. It's not just about policies and paperwork. Sometimes you need actual gear to get the job done. That's where your VAR-based services can come in. So as a VAR, you're not just recommending tools, you're delivering the goods, so to speak. Firewalls, you've got them. Encryption software, you've got that locked and loaded. You've got compliance tracking tools, those are ready to roll. So thinking of yourself being I look at it basically like you're now the superhero for compliance, and you're going to be able to come in, say that healthcare provider needs to upgrade. You're going to be upgrading firewalls, doing a lot of things to help them. So you're not just helping, they're wondering, how did they ever live without you before? You're really there to be a one-stop shop for their all-in compliance partner. So you can consolidate their services, handle remediation, manage security, the VAR gear. It's all under one roof. They don't go outside of anywhere. We'd also say that you want to make sure you build up that brain power and have that team educated around these regulations and become that expert. So there's a commitment there. Streamlining your processes, make the compliance, making it feel a little more like a breeze or as close to it. Making sure you have the right technology stack. Use smart technology that's going to basically monitor, report, and manage compliance. And beyond that, I would say to encourage that as you're evaluating that technology, asking yourself the question is that, does this add to my commitment and check boxes around our compliance offering? If it's not, then why are we doing it? Because if we're foundationally going to do this all in, we go all in. Okay. So I wanted to touch on two things real quick to kind of hold, tie this all together. So you're a sales leader within the MSP. You've got sales reps that are going to go out and talk around, these different cybersecurity compliance offerings. And now that you're going to be out there, so say they're that net new logo hunter role out there. A net new guy that's out there, when you were working with a compliance shop, it is an advantage for them in the marketplace. Having a cybersecurity certification is like showing up, sort of like showing up to the client's meeting with, your Superman cape on professionally. It says, I know my stuff and I won't let your data get, kidnapped. So you have some professional authority. Clients are going to trust you more when you've got that credential to back it up. It's like if you're, at a trivia night, I'd want to have the guy that was really good at all the trivia questions and the guy that's not. So we're not guessing. So having that one-stop shop vibe where all the services are under one roof for that guy out in the field, where we can handle remediation, manage security, VAR stuff. You're basically turning into the Costco of compliance. Everything you need in one spot. That's where we want to get it all. Don't send those people somewhere else. having seamless integration, no more vendor juggling. Clients love that they can basically come to the simplicity of that process where it's under one shop. You've got it all covered, sort of like your compliance blanket. Okay. Revenue, the fun part, growth there. New revenue streams. Compliance as a service is going to make more money. Think of it as like turning on a subscription box, and then we can now say, okay, we're going to now cross-sell and upsell against these things where, oh, you do have compliance services. Wait, let me offer not only the compliance stuff, but our security package that's bundled into it. Okay, makes it almost one and the same. Your client retention and satisfaction are going to go up because of this, and having a proactive management style where we've gone through a SOC 2 certification really just puts you in a place where you're not just putting out fires. In that sense, you're kind of almost installing smoke detectors and you're fireproofing the walls. Okay. And all of that competitive advantage we're saying is, be a unicorn in a herd of horses. While other MSPs are offering some compliance help, you're out there delivering, that full, compliance buffet from app to dessert. Okay. You're going to stand out in that sense. And that operational efficiency is going to ultimately end up for having some cost savings, better reaction to customers. And again, more client smiles equals cost savings. I do have some stuff that I'm going to basically provide in terms of follow-up, but I also wanted to make sure that we had some examples peppered in through different verticals and different types of customers that a sales executive from a hunter perspective might be going out towards. So for financial stuff, this PCI use case showing the steps they did in initial assessment, handled remediation, put in managed security, handled some VAR stuff, they won the business. Okay, by showing off the MSP's compliance as a service, it's sort of like it's the hot thing. The account needs to be, the account executive needs to understand that this is going to help them, but they need to be armed out there in the field to basically differentiate themselves from everybody else. Similarly, from the people that maybe are more in the account manager role or people that are expand or maintaining, if they're tasked to basically renew and expand that current service offering, they're going to have increased customer retention. Having the compliance discussion, because it's ongoing, you're showing ongoing love and ongoing value to them. So when you're constantly helping clients stay compliant, they don't just stick around. They're going to be happy enough to where they're probably going to send you a Christmas card because you're keeping them in business. You're not just a vendor anymore. You are part of their team. Okay. Without having you there, they might not be in business. So you become the go-to for all things secure and certified. Clients are going to trust you like they, trust their, favorite coffee shop. They serve up the right one every time. I'm going to go to them. The revenue growth opportunities from a recurring revenue perspective, of course, we look at that as the gift that keeps giving. The managed services and compliance monitoring, those are going to be predictable, valuable MRR for your customer, revenue share going up because they're looking at doing things that they weren't doing before with this cross-selling. Oh, the managed account manager can be like, we've been talking about managed compliance for years. We haven't been doing it. Good news is we're in a place now organizationally. We've committed to it. We've done our process. We're ready to help partners do theirs. So enhancing that client relationship, having that differentiator is, again, a theme here. But at the end of the day, it puts your team in both perspectives, whether they're out there hunting net new logos or growing the accounts that you have. This tool in the tool belt is critical for them. Okay. Similar type stuff for the respect to maybe GDPR. I wanted to include some other scenarios of how you can see a path towards that increased revenue with the assessment, the remediation, pro services, and VAR services. It can handle in GDPR. I also have included some things from a HIPAA perspective, financial perspective. All of it's good. Okay, guys, we're going to basically provide all this to you guys, hopefully showing you that there aren't a lot of no's of how you can't, tackle a particular vertical, a particular industry, particular customer type. It's all applicable. So to sort of wrap things up, again, we have our benefits that we've kind of hit on a lot. I'm not going to belabor it, but the long-term client relationship through that trust you've built, the demand for ongoing services. Sorry, I have to click forward. Revenue generating, reduce client churn, and you have that big competitive advantage. Okay. Now, one last tool to basically, how do I go from here, Pat? How do I go from having to work through all this information, and where do I get started? So the one thing that most partners we work with, the one question that usually is a very simple one is, I don't know what I don't know yet. And so from a scoping perspective, MSPs and their customers they work with, they may be looking at a certification, and in fact, they probably need a certification and sometimes avoid it. What Control Case has built and developed is what we call our self-assessment tool for MSPs. I'm going to share out a different screen to kind of show you what this tool is going to be all about and show you some of the outputs of it. One second. Okay. So guys, again, we're going to include all the information on this tool that you're welcome to use at any point. And we're happy to follow up on, submission. Basically what we're looking at is a self-assessment tool using a lot of the same criteria that we do for evidence collection in our full certification process. When we're looking at this tool, what we've built is sort of what we see as our four most common certification types for getting the process of kicking off. Like, how do I start from here? So what am I looking for? So say we're in this case doing a SOC 2. We update that with, is it my company as an MSP or is it my customer that needs it? Let's just say it's them for the moment. What environment are we working in? Is it on-premise? Is it on AWS? Is it in Azure? What this is doing is building a profile of where you can take the inheritance of what you're doing with them as a MSP, noting that you have these types of service offerings, your types of ballparks in terms of your volume of assets, your applications, your employee size. We also wanted to kind of note, just from the standpoint of their maturity, how have they thought about compliance at all, or they've been certified in the past, or they at least measure against some things. That helps gauge where they are from a policy and procedures perspective that can help sort of give us an idea of ballpark of what they were to start today under great conditions, what would they be looking at. Also some stuff here for just basic Q&A, yes, no, not applicable, but as you can see with the MSP relationship you have with the customer, you should know most of this. And the hope is that we now, within a few minutes, have essentially built out a nice final proposal that can at least get the ball rolling to say, if we were to start today on our SOC project, we could be looking at roughly this type of timeline. Now, I'm going to share my screen again really quick to show you the actual output. One moment. And we will definitely not start over, so don't worry there. We'll get to the very end here real quick. Okay, so what we look at, the self-assessment tool, and we'll again forward all information on this. You have the opportunity to have this information come to myself, reviewed with team members like Ricardo. And what we're doing is basically building a quick proposal that shows the level of effort of what we're dealing with on your output based on your answers. So in this particular case, if we were looking at a potential project. Now, obviously, this has to be vetted a little more on our end to make sure it's all, that we set proper expectations. But based on the, 110 controls, 57 of them are requirement ready. We're about 52%. So what we see this as a great tool is that people that have maybe said, you know what, I don't want to even think about this because I think I'm starting from zero. That's not the case in most, relationship. You're actually going to be further along than you think. This tool is just putting it in context to make sure that you understand it. A little more information about the actual SOC 2 process, similar to some of the stuff that Ricardo went over, how it's all handled. But again, we wanted to at least present this as a tool. There is no obligation to use it beyond just for what it's intended, is to at least give the MSP and their customers a standpoint of saying, if I was to start today, would I be roughly around this? We can at least start the conversation from there. So thank you again for your time today.